Our Highline Voices, 106.5 KQWZ LPFM.
Connecting Highline and our region.
History, cultural heritage, art, performances, contemporary pop culture.
We collect, preserve, and tell the stories of the Highline region and its people.
We want to embrace our differences and similarities.
We want to extend our mission outside the walls of the museum. Our Highline Voices, 106.5 KQWZ LPFM.
Hi everyone, this is Nancy from the Highline Heritage Museum and welcome back. Tonight we have this beautiful person. I'm so proud that she's here with us. And I'm just happy that she's here. Why are we doing this project? Once again, is the concept of bringing more accessibility to everyone, to more people, the ones that don't like museums, to the ones that are working 2-3 jobs, the ones that, have disabilities issues, accessibility issues, or just don't like us, period. And so we're hoping that this allows us to start just having that dialogue with you and with everyone else. And so today we got Chieko, and I'm going to let her introduce herself, and then we'll take it from there. Chieko, thank you so much for allowing us to do this with you. As you know, we love you, and we're just happy that you had the time to do this with us. So, we're going to start. I'm going to let you introduce yourself, and then we start with the questions.
Great, thank you. Thanks for having me here tonight. I'm so excited to be here at the museum. This is one of my favorite museums in the county. My name is Chieko Phillips, and I work at an organization called 4Culture, which is a cultural funder and service provider for cultural organizations throughout the county. So I spend a lot of time in museums, at heritage organizations, cultural events, and getting to experience the wonderful diversity of culture that we have here in King County.
Wonderful. Yeah, we've known each other for who knows how many years now. We know for many years now. And then this is something that I like about that is just that we do share the passion to, I guess, be more empathy, kindness. Yeah. And that kindness be translated to the work that we do and, serving our communities and doing all this. But before I start talking way too much, I'm just going to turn it back to you because I do talk a lot. And so you're going to be my police. Please interrupt me if I talk too much. And so, Chieko, who are you and why? Why this field?
Mm-hmm. I started in this field through museums. Actually, I feel like it's more so through history. Mm-hmm. Just really a curiosity about how things were, why things are, how things got to be, how they are. I think that was really instilled in me through my parents. So when we were young, we spent a lot of times at national parks and at museums and zoos and learning in a really informal way, and just kind of being curious and letting that, go and being able to explore. And when it came time to think about, what career, I might do, I was studying history in school because I just loved it so much. And I turned naturally to museums because they were spaces that were really comfortable to me. I think my parents took us there when we were young. So I just, I liked to go to them and was really curious about how the content gets decided on what's in the museum. And that's the question that really guided me into studying museums, studying collections and studying curation, and just trying to figure out how do you get more diverse stories on the wall, because that is what was important to me, as I identify as Black and Japanese, and a lot of times when I, go to museums and you don't see those stories when I was young, right? I grew up in Georgia, so didn't see a lot of those stories in the museums. And so that was kind of my guiding curiosity when I was starting my career, is how do I get me on the walls?
Yeah.
So that other people, when they're coming to museums, can feel more connected.
Yeah. And I think all of us, so far, the ones that I interview and the ones that I talk to, we kind of had the same idea of how are we going to communicate to our communities? How are we going to do? How are we going to honor what a museum is, and then really reflecting serving those communities? And yes, it is a very interesting process and the curation process. And historically, when you look at the history of museums, I don't know. It's just, to me, is, and I apologize for me saying this, but it's in a really arrogant feel in many ways. And I know I'm kind of pushing the lines here, but only because historically, only the ones, rich people showing off their collections, and then after that, only academics being able to enter those fields, and then later on, little by little, making it more public. But it came from that seed of we are the ones who decide to decide how to do this work. And then as the time passes, it's great that we in a generation where we see those changes taking place, and we see those changes of those values of what community is. And so thank you for sharing that. So as a little girl thinking of museums and all that, what was your favorite part of a museum?
Well, when I was young, I feel like I liked the museums where you could touch things. Of course, like in the touch tanks at the aquariums, and all of the interactives, and just places where you could go and play. And I feel like as I got older, and I started, I guess at that point I wasn't thinking about working in museums, but I liked to go and learn about local history. So things about the places where I lived, the street signs at intersections that were familiar to me, and like learning things that happened there in past times. Like one of my favorite exhibits still is this one on Civil War cartography. And it was put on at the Atlanta History Center, and I remember it was like this big interactive in the middle of the room, and it was like doing some layering of like historic maps on top of, like it looked like Google Maps. And it was like different maps of different battles that happened as part of the Battle of Atlanta and the Civil War. Another thing that was interesting was it would have a map of like where they would have slave auctions. And there was one, I remember, it sticks with me. It's like this MARTA, MARTA is the public transit in Atlanta. And it's like the MARTA station by Perimeter Mall, which I go by all the time. And it was like, oh, there was actually a very prominent slave auction that took place there regularly. And so just learning about those layers of history that happen in the places are still very much there, but that history can get lost if you're not looking for it, and you're not constantly trying to kind of remember your ancestors and what happened in the places that you live every day. So that exhibit was really amazing, and I wish they would put it on again. So I could
maybe with this interview, maybe you will start a conversation to say, okay, and I think history is not only for one-time exhibit. It is something that should be bringing it up to the public constantly in many different formats: presentation, a field trip, or a program, or exhibits, preservation too. I mean, just finding ways to always tell the story. No, you're right. I mean, I think that museums tell especially history museums, they are the ones who need to be telling what is happening in the area, what took place, and then things or stories that nobody remembers them, and then bring them up to the surface. It's very interesting where we live on these demographics between history that has happened 100 years ago versus something that just happened last week or last year, and what history is. Has been a very controversial, for some reason, discussion as to, well, what happened last year is not history. It's like, well, that is history, and that is already part of the conversation for the next generation.
It's the future's history.
Yeah, well, and I was at this conference in New York many years ago, and it was right after 9/11. And it was the first time where the curators were talking about how they were processing the items from the Twin Towers.
Wow.
And that was way before the museum was built, way before any of that. And so the topic of the interview, so here we are, it's September 11th, the anniversary of, and a New York conference. And the session time was around in the morning. And so they was dry. Everyone were reliving some of those things. And what it was interesting about that one is that they did call that the history is in the present. 9/11, it was just, I think, a couple of years before that. And even the idea of processing, and it was really scary how the curators were processing those artifacts, all that psychological therapy needs that they needed to go through just processing them. They will show us a photo, and there was just a photo of just, you see lines, and each line were different colors. And they asked us a question, do you know what that is? Nobody knew. And I said, those are, all those lines floors are collapsed, condensed. And so you basically know that between in each line, there were people who died on those lines. And so I was like, how do you address that? How do you concept that? And then how they turn all that around and make it into an exhibit. And so past history, present history is an interesting topic. Going back to you, I'm going to concentrate on you. So as you continue to grow and as you continue to be aware of history, museums, and then you chose this field, can you tell us a little bit more about your journey up to where you are right now?
Yeah. So the journey. So right now I work at an agency, 4Culture, that it funds a lot of museums. It funds a lot of different types of organizations, but that's why I feel like I'm still connected into the museum world, because I do get to work with a lot of folks that work in museums, and a lot of museums come and apply to our funding programs and are fortunate to receive funding. So still definitely related in the museum world. And I feel like the experience that I got working in museums definitely contributed to where I am now, and kind of my curiosity grew, right? So earlier I talked about, I was like, how do diverse stories get on the walls? And I feel like the answer to that was intention, wanting to reflect the diversity of a museum's community, having staff that want to have that happen and make that a priority, and then do the research and the curation and that work to get those stories up there. Now it's not that easy, but it's who's in the room, right? Who's doing the work? Who is setting the priorities? And so that is, is understanding that. I was like, okay, it's who's in the room. But there's this whole other factor around having something come to fruition, which is having the resources, the monetary resources to do so. Right? There's the human resources, there's the intellectual resources, and then there's the money. And a lot of museums, projects, initiatives, ideas, right, that are coming from underserved communities of color, museums that are BIPOC run, are chronically and historically underfunded, and experience disproportionate impacts of systemic racism. And so just those like compacted years of not being funded can make it hard for these initiatives, these projects, these even whole institutions to come to life. And so my curiosity shifted into like, okay, who decides who gets the money, right? Where does the money come from? And so one of the sources of funding at all of the different nonprofits that I had worked at before coming to 4Culture were all funded by 4Culture. And I did have the privilege, that's how we met, was actually we served on an advisory committee together for 4Culture. And so was able to get a little peek into like what happened at a funding agency where it's a public funder, we're a public funder, and we put a lot of agency into community panels to make decisions or make recommendations on where the funding should go. And, so it's like I got a peek into some of the decision-making processes around where the funding goes.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like, what would it be like to like get in and like meddle around with that, and just see.
Just a little bit, right?
Just understand, a part of the larger ecosystem that make museums run and help them to thrive. And so that's how I ended up at 4Culture. And systems are really similar. There are decision-making processes that happen everywhere. It happen in museums, they happen at 4Culture.
Mm-hmm.
And when it comes to, systemic racism and things that prevent, people of color from getting access, like those systems of white supremacy work in very similar ways. They're just in different contexts.
Yeah.
So it has been, continues to be really interesting, like understanding how the systems work within a funding agency that works with grant programs, and trying to get the general public access to resources that are public resources.
Yeah.
And kind of how do you break those systems and work within those systems,
And it's hard because you come to the table with your heart on the table, meaning you want to do good, you want to be fair, you want to have that balance. But to me, that's the keyword, balance on the different factors. There's no ABC. There's like a dominoes effect of everything that you do. Is an impact in there. And it's hard when we have many years ago, I did this talk about prejudice and the origins of it. Where is prejudice? Oh my God, it's one of the most intriguing. To me, it's like a rabbit hole. It's just really go deeper and deeper what that means. And looking at the history and looking at these experiments that started in the 1960s, and it's like, oh gosh, it's so interesting how we, in our very basic human condition, want to feel that we belong. Mm-hmm. And when we feel that we're part of a group and the other person doesn't look like part of a group, we are in a very defensive mode. This is immediately within seconds is them versus us versus them. And it's this organic thing that happens to all of us. We all prejudice, we all have our own bias. It's impossible for one person to say, no, I'm not racist. Oh, I'm not prejudiced. No, we one way or another we do that. It could be from the racial angle. It could be from a physical angle. It could be from any like appearance, like, hey, you're too tall, you're too short, you're a little chubby, are you really thin? And to your ethnic, and into your sexual orientation, or to your religion, or even gender, or all these different areas that define us as a human beings. And so it's always, like, we have way more things in common than differences. Raise how many hands you'll find a mom in the community. Raise how many hands you will find a person who has felt pain before, or feels sad, or is hungry, or sleepy, or whatever. And so all I'm saying is that systems, they are human systems. Even though we use the term of professional, institutional, at the end of the day, we're humans, and we bring those elements into the table. And we bring it pain. We feel a lot of pain, the pain of things that happen to us, or that we feel frustrated, or we feel anger, or we feel hopeful. And so, yes, systems, decision makings, it is hard because you're dealing with the structure on writing. But when you're talking to people, you're dealing with people. You're not addressing the structure in writing. Trying to make sure we are on the line, that we don't go anywhere but on that, what we're supposed to do. And so what you do is so intriguing, and it's so, I don't know, interesting. And I'm sure that you learn lessons all the time when it comes to the human element on the different areas. One of my favorite topics when addressing funding or museums or the little ones, the kids. they are the ones who are coming after us. They are the ones who will be covering what we're doing now and in a completely different era, but still, what are we doing? How are we cultivating those relationships with the kids, and how are we telling them, yes, your story matters. Yes, your photo can be on the wall. Yes, you can be in this position. And so I hope that people can see how beautiful she is. I hope that you can see yourself reflected. And yes, anyone can be in different areas. And it's something that when I was invited at 4Culture first, I actually was really nervous.
Me too.
I was really nervous. It was a lot of anxiety. It was like I felt this giant castle. There's like, oh my God, am I gonna be able to even say anything or contribute to anything? And I feel very intimidated by it. And so when the first time, one of the you might not believe me when I say this. So my very first meeting, it was three of us, but we're new. It was me, Michael Moore, and then Eric Nelson at the Nordic. It was the first day for the three of us coming to you guys, but you were already there. And so one of the first things that you broke the ice without even knowing that you broke the ice is that you grabbed the potato chips in front of me and it just opened it and it just saying, and that felt so human. And I'm like, thank you. It was not as intimidating, it was not as scary. And it was like, I thought it was, like more like a suit, very, very serious and formal thing. But that action of what you did, your action was the very first icebreaker.
Just that crunch of the bag opening.
Just grabbing like nothing, just grabbing the potato chips in front of me, and it just I eating it. It's like, oh my gosh, this is good.
Like it's okay.
It's okay. It's a human element here. It's okay. And so I've never shared that story with you, but that was the very first.
I love that. Because I loved when we had advisory committee meetings because we got to put the snacks out and then we also got to eat them as staff. This food was not for staff. The food was for our advisors and our board, and we only got to eat them when and I am such a chip fiend. I just a snack goblin. So anytime there's snacks, I'm like.
And I was hungry, but I was too shy and too.
So those. I was so intimidated too when I started on the Heritage Advisory Committee, and I was like maybe 2 years in, I think at NAM, working at the Northwest African American Museum. I was, at least 10 years younger than everyone else on the committee. I was like, you want me? You want me on this committee? I think at the time, everyone was white. Because Brian left the committee and he recommended me to sit on it. And I was so intimidated. And I was just like, why am I in this room?
Yeah.
But looking back on it, I'm so glad that I didn't let that like negative kind of like, why do they want me? I just said yes. I was like, okay, like, sure, let me see what this is about. And, I didn't know what Robert's Rules of Order were. Actually, Eric Nelson like taught me what they were, so I remember just being like, I'm so out of my league, but I learned so much. And I got the insight into 4Culture that it just fed me with like more and more questions of like, how does this work? And we're supposed to be serving everyone. Are we? How is the money getting out? Who are sitting on these panels? Like,
yeah,
where is the outreach going? Like, how do people know about these grant programs?
Yeah.
So yeah, it was and when I started out a career in the cultural sector, I didn't know anything. I never thought that I would be in funding. I didn't even really know how you got into the funder space or to the philanthropy space. And so I feel like there's a role also, just kind of a tangent, but just sharing that this is a career path and it doesn't just have to be something that people stumble into, but it can be something that you intentionally set up your career to be in philanthropy or in public funding.
And that's exactly what I share about that first meeting, because historically, you look at these institutions and they're intimidating, either as a person who is applying to get funding, to even ask questions. Hey, I don't know, I don't speak the language, what can I do? or I never done any. I have, like a lot of community members will have a lot of experience doing the work, but never in an official capacity, or formal capacity, and through applications. And so one of the reasons why I'll share that is breaking down those walls, just breaking them down, and to say, no, you know what, don't be too intimidated. And if not all places are like this, and 4Culture is one of those places, they are not like that. They are not intimidating. And I'm just glad that you leading the heritage area in the institution. And I'm glad that you're representing the many voices that have not been represented before. And that, yes, that we're teaching the little ones up there, if you're watching us right there, you can do it. You can either be in a museum, you can curate, you can do community work, you can come with areas that you never thought it was even possible. So yeah, just use us as an example of just possibilities of the areas that you can go through. It is open to everyone. It's just you wanting to do it. But yeah, it's hard to break those walls, hard to go through a virgin jungle, basically. And it's not the first time I've been sitting in tables where everyone is male and white and older, and I feel completely out of place. It's like, why am I here? Why do I belong? And then part of me says, well, if I walk away, the next person that comes after me will feel exactly the same way, and we are not making any progress. And so I'm like, well, I'm gonna give it a try, push the lines, and see what happens. And I'm glad that we did it, that we, despite of the anxiety, of the intimidation, of not knowing, all of us are nervous about things that we don't know. And that's a very human condition. Going back to you. I don't want to take too much of me talking.
You're so interesting too.
Fine, well,
such good insights.
Well, that's what I said is one thing I'm learning through these interviews is that, either we alone or there's a microphone or people, it is just so much that we can share, and not share just for the benefit of one specific program, but just knowing that our human elements, and knowing that it's okay to be us one way or another. I love that you are so warm and friendly. And I hope that through this interview, some people will look at you and like, I do have questions about this. Can I go and contacting them? And hey, I would like to learn more about it. And so that's what it takes sometimes, is just to break those walls and then just, no, it's a safe place. Don't worry.
Yes.
Growing up as an immigrant, even in my own country, there were a lot of institutions that I was so afraid, because I felt that pushback. And so you are not doing it, quite the opposite. If you ever visit their website, 4Culture, you'll see their staff. And then there's like, so colorful and so cool. And right away it tells you that it is about just basically connecting with institutions, connecting with the work that all the institutions are doing, and connecting to the public, you who are going to be recipient of the work that we do. And it just, you're the ones who get the benefits of all of it. We're just doing the work, but they're the ones who actually, get to go to see plays and get to enjoy some murals, and they get to enjoy programs and things like this. Throughout the years, 4Culture has been funding us in many different ways. But it's more than just the funding, or just a number, of just a check. It's a guidance and a network, a support network, and then just the space to realize that we are not alone in the middle of the universe, that we're part of a community. And that's another element that I like about your institution. There is a community that you cultivate, and you cultivate. Now you're going to be changing, and we don't have to go deeply. You're going to be changing into a different format and work, and with these new initiatives. And Brian did talk a little bit about that, but I want to learn more about you. And then so this is, any questions about the work that 4Culture does, you can just visit them on the website. But if you want to share it, go for it. All I'm saying is that you don't have to, and just hear more about, I guess, your values and the work that you do, and who are you. I think that see the human element is important, and then how you, because you directly are impacting a lot of the work that takes place here in King County, and especially in the South End, and now that here in Highline. And so take it anywhere you want to do it. tell us a little bit more. You got a few more minutes, so just tell us a little bit more about where you are and an exciting project that you've seen, or where you're heading, or maybe a little bit more of the values, whatever you want to do.
Yeah. Well, I do have to say, because it's not me personally that is influencing the work that's happening.
I know. That's true. That is true.
We have our
Committees,
community panels that make the decisions.
Yeah.
Let's see, something fun. It's just something personal. So I saw a play recently. It has been such a long time since I went and saw a play. I went and saw a production of Clue. It was at the Center Theater in what's it called? Seattle Center. And it was total community theater, amateur theater, but it was so fun. It was in a black box theater, and it has just been such a long time since I've seen theater, and it just really reinvigorated me with an appreciation for these types of cultural spaces that like people can rent. So this was a really small production company. I think they've only done 2 plays in their entire existence, and they just rented the theater, the black box theater, to be able to use it to put on this production. It was just a weekend, and so just the necessity of those types of spaces. And they mentioned that the sound booth had a machine in it that still used floppy disk.
Whoa.
And I was like, they made it work with flop. I'm like, where do you even buy a floppy disk anymore? But it just reminded me of, like, if people want in their heart, they have the passion, right? And they want to put on something cultural. They want to create an expression of art or culture in some way. They will figure out a way to do it. Especially if the resources are there. If they could be updated, even better, which I feel like is where 4Culture comes in. But the drive and the desire and the passion for the arts, I think, is just like so human, and we make it possible.
This is a discussion about our museums is essential. The cultural sector is essential, especially since COVID. Or during COVID, that was one of the questions: how essential it is to support the cultural sector. And one of my arguments is like, absolutely, yes, it's essential. What happens when you have, I don't know, many of you probably seen it, but that example of you have a glass of water, and then you start putting negative things and then stress and issues and problems and bullying and all kinds of things, where that water start turning into, muddy and bad. Life is life. Life will always give you things that you just don't want to, but you still have to cope with all this ugliness one way or another. But what happens when you add water, clean water? You add water into the pot. The water that's dirty overflows, and it just slowly just goes away. That's what, to me, cultural sector does, is a clean water. There's allows us tools for us to cope in our realities, tools for us to say, hey, this is who we are. The problems are not representing us. Yes, we might be in poverty, and we might be having, sleeping on the floors or having food or all that, but is that what defines us? That's the only thing that we can offer? That's the only thing that we do? No, there's a human element of us, that artists, for example, exploding and expressing who they are and bringing a different view. You are not just a poor person, you are an artist, and then the people who enjoy that being able to say, this is beautiful, and just start pouring that clean water into our hearts, into our communities, in this community unity. So to me, it is essential, maybe not as a feeding, maybe not as drinking, but something inside of you that you need to get out of that everyday heaviness and everyday stressors and everyday issues. We're never going to walk away from problems. We're always going to have problems, yes. But the cultural sector provides something that nobody else does. It provides a little bit of a healing element, something deeper inside of us. So anyway, we got 5 minutes left. Anything you would like to share more? I don't want to put words into you, Ma, but it's just organically, this is a message for the community, for the youth, for anyone who wants to listen to us. either as a community member, either as an institution, as a human being? I mean, what is, just share something about you that just, I don't know, just share something.
Yeah. Well, I did have one thought that popped up. It's a show recommendation in case anyone is loving this conversation around culture being such an important and kind of cleansing part of society. There's a show called Station 11 on HBO. If you can take someone's password or you have it. It's kind of a post-apocalyptic show, but there's a theme around the importance of the arts that I think just really mirrors the conversation that we've been having. But I love what you were saying about, this is a welcoming space. We're welcoming people. If folks have questions about how to get into careers in the museum, or they're just curious about, how to get access to funds or learn about funding or, anything like that. Exactly what you said, like look on our website, look at our faces. I still pick up my phone, but I also respond to email. I encourage questions. I think, being curious and being a continual learner are just a few of my values. And so I never shy away from just talking with people, having coffee. It doesn't even have to be fully formed questions. It can just be, I'm curious about X topic. And, I'm always open to talk about anything.
No, and I'm glad that you're here. I'm glad you're here for anyone who has questions, anyone who have never tried to approach 4Culture and then been able to say, she inspires me. She's friendly. She's warm. I can actually ask these questions. And then, or if you have a constructing concern, because it's all about listening to each other. Yeah. Just have the values of being respectful and then being with a heart of, okay, I do have this concern. Can we address it in a manner that represents your values as a human being? It's great. Why am I making this emphasis? It's like some people feel they have permission to just be disrespectful when it comes to sharing concerns. And you don't have to. You can still share them, but it's just in a different manner, in a way that the way your mom will like you to speak to anyone. And so that's something that I hope that we all cultivate. I'm not saying I'm not doing that. I also need to be mindful of my own impulsive Latina flair here and there. But going back to you, thank you so much for allowing us to do this interview. I hope that that people were able to feel that warmth, and that this sector is a very interesting one, and that funding agencies are not just black and white, not so just easy to cut. It is a lot of things that goes inside, a lot of thinking, and a beautiful team, because she's right, it takes a team, and it's a beautiful community inside of 4Culture that works beautifully. And I don't know. So once again, thank you for allowing us to do this. Chieko.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Our Highline Voices, 106.5 KQWZ LP FM. We envision ourselves sitting at a round table where no one is the leader and stories are heard respectfully, regardless of gender, age, sexual orientation, disabilities, or ethnicity. Our mission is we collect, preserve, and tell the stories of the Highline region and its people. We want to extend our mission outside the walls of the museum. Our Highline Voices represents us all, honoring our past, celebrating our present, and uniting to cultivate our future. This project allows us to reach out to demographics who might be unable to visit the museum. People with disabilities, low-income families, people who don't trust museums, and more. In partnership, we are launching a locally programmed new radio station at the museum, featuring recorded and live Highline's heritage, history, culture, arts, and more. Are you interested in sharing your story? Email director@highlinemuseum.org.